The 2023 Montana legislative session saw a record number of bills up for consideration, making the process of making new laws long and arduous. MTN's chief political reporter Jonathan Ambarian attended an interim committee meeting today where lawmakers discussed how to handle the large volume next session.
In 2023, the Montana legislature took up more bills during their 90-day session than any year in decades, and legislative leaders decided to take a look at what can be done to limit the impact of that huge volume of bills.
This legislative session was absolutely very historic.
With almost 1,700 individual pieces of legislation and 3,400 sets of amendments, the Legislative Services Division says their staff were under a lot of pressure.
We were going 24/7.
The legislature also had to hold more than 2,400 committee hearings. Lawmakers said they had concerns that some bills introduced late weren't getting the time and attention they deserved, and that it was harder for the public to weigh in. The Legislative Council, a committee of leaders from both parties, set up a subcommittee to look at these issues. On Wednesday, they made several recommendations. They called for lawmakers to submit their bill draft proposals through a new online portal instead of going through legislative staff. And they proposed delaying the transmittal deadline, when all bills that don't affect state revenues or spending need to pass out of their first chamber or die. One idea that didn't go forward was putting a limit on how many bills each lawmaker can introduce.
I believe that's why we were elected, our job, to come and pass bills, to draft bills. To me, I think it should be unlimited. That's why you were elected. Talking to other legislators, I would say the majority feel that same way.
These recommendations will now go before the full Legislative Council, and any changes like moving the transmittal deadline would also have to go through the Rules Committee as we get closer to the start of the next legislative session. In Helena, Jonathan Ambarian, MTN News.
A group of public education organizations and disability advocates are challenging a new state law that creates education savings accounts for families of students with special needs. The Montana Quality Education Coalition and Disability Rights Montana filed a lawsuit in Lewis and Clark County over House Bill 393. The bill, sponsored by House Majority Leader Sue Vinton, a Republican from Billings, would allow qualifying students to receive payments out of their school district's budget, which could be used to pay for additional educational resources like tuition or tutoring. The plaintiffs say the bill would divert money from public schools to private entities and reduce resources for special education students within public schools without guaranteeing better outcomes for those using the program. This lawsuit follows one last year that challenges a law creating community choice charter schools in Montana. A Great Falls family is celebrating remission after their 8-year-old son spent the last year battling leukemia. But as MTN's James Rowland explains, the family is figuring out how to move forward after the fight of their lives.
Most 8-year-old boys want to go outside and play. They want to see their friends, go to school. They want to do all the normal things a healthy young kid can do. But for the last year, the life of Ryder Harold has been anything but normal.
We were in Benefice ER, and he was kind of sick, and I mean, we were a little bit worried, but I wasn't ever thinking anything bad could happen. My mom texted me and told me that my little brother had leukemia, and I kind of just broke down like in the middle of the restaurant.
Well, I mean, when I found out, it was definitely life-shattering. You give yourself a couple minutes, and then you have to pull yourself together and get your kid through it.
It's been a wild ride for sure.
In an instance, he was living in a hospital, receiving daily treatment, and not allowed to even be near almost anyone for fear of getting sick.
He's always got family around him, he always does. So him being in the room alone, that was pretty much my biggest concern. I know he doesn't like being alone. He was probably wondering where his mom's at. I mean, he's a strong kid. I knew that he was making through it. We went home for the weekend, me and Jeremy did, and that night when we got home, I actually shaved my head completely. I buzz cut it.
Many others in the community have also cut their hair in support of Ryder's struggles.
Love you, Ryder. Stay strong and fight that fight, bro.
I find it more of like a bond that we got to grow our hair out. We get to grow it out together, and his is still growing, and mine obviously has a long way to go, but they're growing together.
This has become the norm for him, but there is a promise in the near future.
They told me he was in remission on day 28, which was July 11th. And that was pretty good news. But you always wonder, is it still there? They still do spinal taps. He's probably had 15 or 20 spinal taps since June 12th.
Boom.
His cancer has continued to recede ever since, and soon he will be able to return to class and play with his friends again. Usually, after his treatment, Ryder is quite tired. Luckily, when I went to go visit him, Ryder was excited to play his video games. He was clearly having a good day, but not every day is as great.
It's been a huge adjustment. Like, you are used to just living life, and then you have to, like, pretty much stay in a shell. Because if he gets sick, then we go back to Kalispell. You always worry about, like, his mental health more than anything else. Because he gets super depressed. He can't be around his sisters. He can't see his dad. And it's all done through, like, the iPad. You know, is how he communicates with them. He's got a very good support system at school. And so all his classmates know. You know, he doesn't have hair. And, you know, he's got a thing in his chest where he has to be very careful. So when he goes back to school, I think it'll be easier for him because they all know.
His family has had to spend a lot on his medical treatments. They have started a GoFundMe campaign to help cover some of the costs. While he still has to play inside for a bit, Ryder is excited to get back to school soon, see his friends, and be a regular kid again. From Great Falls, Montana, I'm James Rowland, MTN News.